were smooth and pink. One day the king's heralds appeared in the village square, and they blew on their trumpets and spoke with loud, brassy voices. Hear ye, at full noon, a fortnight and 1 day from this day, His Royal Highness the Prince will have reached his 21st birthday. His Majesty the King does now declare a grand ball to be held in his honor. Hear ye, hear ye. What a rustle and bustle! The milliner was soon all out of feathers. Not a spool of ribbon was left in the village. Only cotton and calico remained on the shelves in the shops. Every inch of silk, satin, broadcloth, and gold braid was sold. The first day, dressmakers and tailors stitched and sewed until their needles pushed through their thimbles. Makers of fine boots and slippers never slept at all. Hairdressers curled and frizzed or snapped and clicked with their long, bright scissors day and night. I shall wear a purple gown, said the first sister. I shall wear a green, said the second. As for me, said the third, mine will be mustard yellow. Sister, sighed Cinderella, you have so many dresses. If only I could borrow an old one and go to the ball. You go to the ball. Whoever heard of such a thing? A cinder wrench indeed. Besides, you are much too young. On the night of the ball, the three sisters swept off to the king's palace with skirts rustling, fans waving, feathers fluttering. Cinderella sat by the cold hearth in rags, her toes in ashes. Tears trickled down her cheeks and made a pool beside the broom. Suddenly she heard a swish like the sound of wings in the air. A dark shadow went swiftly past, and Cinderella looked up with wide, startled eyes. On the hearth beside her stood an old woman, all in black, aside a broomstick. She wore a white cape and a high-crowned black hat, and on her shoulder sat an owl-eyed black cat. As though dismounting from a horse, she hopped off her broomstick. Why are you sitting there in the ashes crying? Asked the old lady. Who are you? Asked Cinderella. You wait and see, said the old woman. Underneath her wide brim hat, her eyes shone bright as blue fire. Why, I say, are you crying? My three sisters. Everyone has gone to the prince's ball. Only I am left behind. At this, Cinderella hid her face in her hands and began to sob. I suppose you think you'll get there by crouching in the dust and doing nothing about it. No, said Cinderella. No, I don't expect to go at all. Are there, asked the old woman, any rats in the trap? Any what? Cinderella was astonished at the question. Don't stand there looking at me, I said. Do you have any rats in the trap? Why, yes, 6. 3 in the trap in the barn, and 3 in the trap in the loft, and 2 gray field mice in the trap in the pantry. Get the traps and put them just outside the garden gate. Cinderella wondered a great deal, but she ran quickly to do as she was told, and the little old woman followed her into the garden. And now, she said, you give me the largest pumpkin in the field. Wondering still more, Cinderella hastened to do the little old woman's bidding. She brought a large round pumpkin, golden as the harvest moon, put it beside the traps. Suddenly, before Cinderella's eyes, the pumpkin changed into a golden coach. The 6 fat black rats changed into 6 fat black prancing horses. The field mice changed, one into a footman and one into a coachman. Both wore gray silver velvet suits and gray velvet hats. Before her wide and shining eyes, Cinderella saw the little old woman reach out for a handful of moonbeams. With a swift weaving motion, she made all of them a gown that gleamed and shone. In a trice, Cinderella's rags were gone. Light as a butterfly's wing, the gown slipped over her shoulders, and on her feet were tiny glass slippers. Cinderella, said the little old woman, shaking her broomstick. When the clock strikes 12, you must leave the ball. If you do not, the horses will be rats, and the footmen will be mice, and the coach will be a pumpkin, and you, my fine lady, will be a cinder wench all in rags. So see that you do not forget. I will not forget, but who are you? Asked Cinderella. I am your fairy godmother. You must shadow pass over the treetops, and her fairy godmother was gone. When the coach arrived at the palace and Cinderella stepped out, the serving men were so astonished that buttons popped off all their tight waistcoats. Their eyes were round with wonder as Cinderella, as if gowned in starlight, floated past them. When the prince saw her, he left a duchess in purple and ermine standing at the center of the ballroom floor. Nor did he dance with any other once he had taken Cinderella by the hand. So light-hearted was Cinderella, so charming the prince, so bewitching the music, that when the town clock struck the first note of 12, Cinderella did not hear it, but at the second she seemed to see among the dancers a little old woman all in black, with a high-crowned black hat. Cinderella gave a cry of fear and fled in an instant. What was the prince's astonishment to find himself quite alone in the great ballroom. He searched in vain for the beautiful princess with whom he had danced all evening. Cinderella fled the palace gardens and was safely in her coach as the clock struck the final note of 12. The next morning the three sisters could talk of nothing but the strange princess. The prince would dance with no one else, said the eldest sister. Why he danced with her, no one knows. She was certainly no handsomer than many other, and she wore no plumes at all. The second sister shook her head. Did the prince dance with no other? Asked Cinderella. You mind the fire, snapped the first sister, but the third sister said with a sigh. At the stroke of 12, the music stopped, the ballroom grew dark, and the prince cared for nothing but the strange princess. But she had left. When she heard this, Cinderella smiled happily at the hearth brew. But the prince was so sad at the loss of the princess that the king declared a second ball should be given on the evening chosen by the king. Again the three sisters went proudly off to the castle in their laces and satins, and again Cinderella rode in her fairy coach. The prince welcomed Cinderella with such rapture that she could think of nothing but his smiles, nor would he move from her side, though a queen with two empresses had traveled many miles in the hope that he would notice them. 9 rang the town clock, 10, 11. On the first stroke of 12, Cinderella was still dancing with the prince, and on the third and fourth a tiny whisper reached her ear. It was fainter than the chirp of a cricket. When the clock strikes 12, you must leave the ball. If you do not, the horses will be rats. Cinderella, pale with fright, did not wait to hear the rest. On the fifth stroke of 12, the prince found himself alone, and Cinderella rushed through the shining halls, through corridors ablaze with crystal chandeliers. Swiftly the prince followed, more swiftly ran Cinderella, and from the head of the palace steps the prince saw a cinder wench all in rags go weeping into the darkness. 6 black rats went scampering off to hunt for the king's cheese. 2 gray field mice whisked briskly after, and a large pumpkin rolled down the palace hill toward the village. It was golden as the towers of the king's castle. Look as he might, the prince could not find his princess. Sadly he mounted the steps, when suddenly his eye caught a sparkle before him, a flickering gleam like that of a lost jewel. Kneeling, he picked up a tiny glass slipper which he could easily hold in the palm of his hand. He wrapped it in his long velvet sleeve, for with this and this alone could he find Cinderella. So sad was the prince in the days that followed that he would neither eat nor sleep. The king sent messengers far and near to find one whose foot was so small that she could wear the glass slipper, for the prince would wed no other. The morning after the second ball, Cinderella, all in rags, went about her hard task, but always she dreamed of the prince. Her 3 older sisters were crosser than ever. Who ever heard of such a thing? The prince did not dance with us. He danced only with that same strange princess, and she's the daughter of the lord of all the Indies, or so they say. Her dress was woven of diamond threads. Daughter of the lord of all the Indies? Asked Cinderella. You scrub that floor. What are princes to you? The older sister shook her head until her curl papers nearly fell off. For days and days the king's sister pushed in 2 toes, and the third squeezed in 3. "Let me try," said Cinderella. "You, a princess?" mocked their sisters. Likely the prince would wed rags and tatters. "Queen of the dusty hearth." As the sisters laughed and tossed their heads, the king's chief herald knelt before Cinderella, and the glass slipper fit. It shone upon her foot like a star among the ashes. "You are the princess," cried the herald. "Come with us, your highness." Cinderella went with the heralds to the palace, and all the folk crowded after her, the men wondering, the women weeping with envy and disappointment. When the prince looked upon Cinderella, he did not see her rags or the ashes on her cheek. He saw only her golden hair and her wide blue eyes. He saw 1 foot bare and 1 foot twinkling in the glass slipper. So they made her walk with 1 shoe the entire way. Commanded by the king, the heralds blew once more on their trumpets, and the princess has been found. Tomorrow the royal pair will be married. Hear ye, hear ye. The wedding feast lasted 10 days and 10 nights. At all the balls, Cinderella's sisters danced only with stable grooms. As for Cinderella,